start the recording. And we can go ahead and get started. I guess I didn't stay away too long. I'm back again, and hopefully we'll be able to keep helping you as we go along. This week, I met with Patrick and John on Tuesday. Patrick didn't really have much of an upgrade this week again, so I don't really have anything new from LibLime to report to you. I do have one thing to add to the agenda that I'll address right away. As I was getting ready for the webinar this week, I noticed that my list of contacts at the library is a little bit out of date, and there were several people that I took off the list, and it got me wondering as to whether or not there should be more people who would like to be added to the list. So I'm asking you, as people who know who is working at your libraries, if there's other people that would like to join in on these calls, let me know their email address, and I will add them to the list so that everyone has an opportunity to be involved in these meetings and hear what you all hear. Ben. All right. Okay, so let's go on to the second one. Before I retired, I had started asking for upgrade experiences, problems, bugs, either in Sandbox or in production. And I thought one way to sort of address some of that right now, since I've been sort of away from things for a week, is to look at the support center tickets that are currently open. And I decided to start looking after August 30th, and just wanted to ask the people who had sent in these bug reports if they could explain or tell what the status of these particular reports are at this point. And Ben, since your name is the first one that I'm highlighting, wonder if you could just quickly go through the reports that you'd sent in and what result or resolution has been found so far. And if there isn't a resolution, if you could just tell us what is the most important of the ones that you've reported. I'll be sure to ask about those next week when I meet with Patrick and John. Okay, Ben, you're not talking.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to. I was just on a call with somebody else.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What was the question?
The question was if you could just sort of real generally talk a little bit about the reports that you've sent to LibLime since the beginning of the month and where they are in the process of getting answered.
Sure, yeah, and I'll try to keep my rants to a minimum too. So a lot of what we've reported are things that kind of took us completely by surprise. Some of it has to do with the fact that we didn't do terribly extensive testing in the sandbox because we were told that what we're moving to is not so much a new thing for us as it would be a new thing for the public libraries that are switching over as part of the code fusion process. And the other thing is just we did not expect this time frame when it came time to switch. We thought we were going to have weeks more at least, if not a couple of months. So we did what we could, and some of the things, well, you have to discover some things live. One of the other problems is that, quite frankly, the code that they pushed through to production, especially with the point release stuff, in my humble opinion, was not ready for prime time. That it had just left the developers and was included because it happened to meet their timeline. And so these are some of the things that we're catching. One of the other problems is that we have discovered that there are some, and a lot of this didn't show up as tickets, and I'll get back to that in a minute. A lot of what we've discovered is that the sandbox and production are radically different environments, even when they're running on the same system numbers. There are underlying differences between the two of them, and they caught us by surprise. So some of that, 90% of that, Jim has had to deal with, often late at night. The rest of it, I'm slowly starting to report. Okay, so back to the stuff that I have reported. Let me take a look at what's on your screen right now. Do you want to start with the one that's highlighted, last modified column missing in reports?
Sure.
Okay. Column marked, oh, last modified. Yeah, this is a difference between what we had seen in the past and what we're seeing now, where we had the opportunity to do a sort by last modified in reports, which was really handy because you could go and take a look at, say you've got like 15 different reports that have to do with items. The one that you're looking for was the one that you had modified like 2 weeks ago or last month or last year, and all the rest of them were really old. Yeah, we need to go and clean up these reports, but that was a really handy way of identifying the one that we needed. So we list by last modified and then pick the one that we wanted, and unfortunately that column is gone. So that's fairly straightforward.
Okay. Okay, and it looks like they are going to add it back, but the question is when.
Yeah, we never really know when. I got to say that LibLime has been a little more responsive these days than they had been in the past. In the past, when they said, yeah, it's on our to-do, that often meant, don't hold your breath. You might see it in a couple of years. You'll probably forget that it was even missing by the time it rolls back in. These days, it tends to come back quickly, sometimes within a couple of weeks. So it would have been nice if it hadn't left, but maybe it'll come back soon.
I'll see if I can get any information from Patrick on what influences their decisions on what gets addressed when.
Yes.
If we can get a better handle on that.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if there's some way that we can tell LibLime which things are more important than others, like adding it into the request, saying this is top priority, or this is fix it when you can kind of thing, I think would be useful for us to know, because if that helps influence them at all, I think it'd be a good thing for us to try to add to the requests that are made.
Right. Well, obviously anything that's marked with University of Hartford is going to be top priority.
Absolutely.
There are, I don't report things lightly for the most part. There are things that I report and say, look, this is something we noticed. Maybe this is something we can correct at some point, but honestly, no one's going to lose their life because this feature is missing now. And I do try to identify those. But the other thing is what's happening behind the scenes. I don't have a firm grasp on it, right? So the things that they think are easy, I never would have guessed. I would have guessed that it would take, hundreds of hours of programming, but to them, it turns out it's just a simple flip of the switch and it's up and running. The things that we ask that are really, really simple, sometimes we'll never ever get because reasons. And I also get the feeling that and I was going to ask you this to get your opinion on it, there's a whole nother group that we're not in direct contact with, and that's called development. So the people that I send support tickets to, and they often look at it and they say, okay, yes, this is a genuine bug. I'm going to send this off to development, capital D. And then things happen that I know nothing about, and they come back and they say, well, development released a, put a point release out in the sandbox. Could you test? And then, all right, cool. So that's my response. I don't know what this means. The folks that I'm talking to, I know they know a lot about the system, but I suspect they don't know everything about how to code it. So I guess there's another group called development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like I guessed that one correctly.
Yeah, and that group is headed by Clay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yes, I remember Clay.
And Bill is part of the group, and
Right.
Ryan. And I think they've got one other person that is more or less dedicated to the development process, but I'm not sure what his name is. Yeah.
I kind of want to take that group and shake them a little. Maybe not by the throat. That seems rude. Perhaps the shoulders. Because of the other things that I've been noticing, where the CSS files are radically different between one side and the other, and the way even that numbers are coded behind the scenes is completely different from between the sandbox and production. And we, again, really got caught short on that when it came time to our upgrade.
Sure, and even for people who are just looking at the source of the page and trying to make changes in CSS, that has an implication for them as well, because if you can't rely on the names of things, it's going to be always a guessing game.
Right, right.
Okay, I'll make sure that I talk with Patrick about that, and depending on when I can get an answer from him, I'll either send an email out or else talk about it on our next meeting.
Yeah,
what I think I would like to do is ask Patrick, if I have your agreement, if I could ask Patrick to have Clay meet with us once to sort of explain what the philosophy is behind what they address and how they determine priorities, and what would influence them from us to make their priorities a little bit different.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I love it when the few times that we've gotten Clay on the line, it's a real education. He has such a radically different view on what's happening with COA. And I also understand that a lot of times the answer that I'm going to get is not going to be one that I appreciate. The fact is that it comes down to money. Even the stuff that we recognize as bugs, somebody has to pay somebody in order to fix it. So right, and the maintenance that you pay is only part of it. It's right. I mean, I'm still going to ask for a solution. I'm going to ask for it as quickly as possible. And I'm sorry that somebody has to get paid for it, but I would like it very much if it wasn't me.
Okay. All right. Comments about any of the other ones that you've sent in? Oh gosh,
reports running slow is just about to be closed.
Okay. Was that, as far as you know, is that a matter of the server needing to be rebooted again?
They went and took a look, and at the time that they looked, there wasn't a problem, which is annoying because there was a problem. There was a problem this morning. There was a problem last night. But hey, I'm glad it's up and running now, and if we catch it again, we'll report it then. If they can look behind the scenes and find out why it wasn't running the way that it should, boffo. But beyond that, we need this stuff to run, that's all. What do we got next? Batch item editor, page navigation not working. Oh, that's fairly self-explanatory. There's a pagination navigator at the bottom of batch item editor. And if you've got, say, 24 items in your list, it will show the first 20, insist that there's only one page, and not allow you to go to the next one. It's a bug that recognized it. It was sent off to development. All right, what do we got next?
Let's see.
Oh, that one. That's weird. Item values defaulting to something else when reopening an item for editing. When you all right, let me just restate this in a different way. When you open an item for editing, there are certain values that show up. Now they just display. If you click save, even with those values showing, it doesn't necessarily assign those values. But withdrawn is one of them, right? So you open up an item for editing, one of the boxes is going to say withdrawn at the bottom of it, which is disconcerting to look at. But, you know, I reported, I got some good feedback from Jane. Jane said that there are certain fields that we're looking at that really shouldn't even be displayed at that spot. They should only be modified at the, oh gosh, what's that other, the item status
the one
page.
That's in administration, right?
Right. Well, there's that. So she gave me some advice on going back to the item fields configuration thing and changing a bunch of stuff. She also said that there are certain things that should only be assigned. I'm a cataloger at heart, so I'm used to going to the item editor thing. The folks who do circulation transactions are more used to going to an item status thing that shows up. Mm-hmm. And anyways, and setting it there, and I'm like, okay, fine. So I went and hid them on the display, at least as far as the sandbox is concerned, so we can test this stuff out. And it seems to work just fine. I need to run a bunch of changes past my colleagues here to make sure that they're on board with them, and then make some changes behind the scenes. We have the advantage, I think, over other institutions where Jim has found where item information is being fed through using APIs and is massaging that data to display the way that we want it to. So we're not tied to the item fields configuration screen. I can move stuff around there pretty much however I want, and it's not going to change the way that it displays to the public. It's just going to change the way that it displays to staff on the back end, which is great for us. Mm-hmm. I recommend it if you have the ways and means.
Okay.
What else we got?
Course
information. Oh gosh, yeah, that one. Yeah, so we upgraded to Bibliovation, and it took a couple of days to realize that the course information for items that have been assigned to a course reserves class, that information wasn't showing at the bottom of the details page anymore. So we reported it to see if LibLime had any information on it or if they had a solution, and it turns out that, yeah, they also noticed that it wasn't displaying, and so they're going to try and fix it. But in the meantime, Jim found another way of pulling that information into the Bib Records display. So again, many hours of his work on the backside. We've got that to display again. We still have to fuss with it a little bit. I think it's showing codes instead of opaque detail information. But at least we have a solution in place here for the time being anyways.
Okay. Okay.
So
you mentioned that there are several things that you haven't reported yet.
Yeah.
Can you give a preview of what you might be reporting?
Yeah, honestly, it comes down to those of you who read the Waldo support list. I'd like to thank both of you. But you might have noticed the message that I sent through the day that we went live that ended with strong letter to follow. That's the stuff that I need to start following up on. The fact that there are at least a dozen conflicting CSS files in the sandbox that need to be dealt with. But then when you make allowances for all that stuff, you figure out exactly what you need to do. Once you transfer that information, those configurations over into production, it's a whole nother set of CSS files. I mean, and it's not just the commands that are within these CSS files. Some of the names are completely different. Coa-Whack, which appears in sandbox, and is heavily used. It's like the second most important CSS file there. That's not what, it's not the primary CSS file that's being run in production. That one's called opac.css. That threw everything out of alignment once we switched over.
Of course it would.
There are other things. There are fields that that are present in the sandbox that are not present in in production. I've collected a list of those. I have to go and get some better examples before I pass those on. This is a problem that we noticed last year, 2 years ago, and it's still a problem where numbers in the sandbox are processed by the software as a number, right? So if you put a 2 in to stand for this item is lost, declared missing, that 2 is really an integer 2, right? Mm-hmm. When you switch over to production, those 2's are represented with quotes around them, which means that they're text. So it's not the number 2, it's the character 2, which is interpreted later in the code as more than just the text. This sounds weird, but it's a big difference because every single time we reference an integer in the sandbox, there's no quotes around it because it's treated as a number. When it gets ported over to production, all those numbers need to have quotes put back around them because they're not numbers, they're text. Most people wouldn't have this problem. It was a huge annoyance for us. I just started broaching this topic with Jane today. She and LibLime are busy massaging our sandbox. Oh, by the way, please don't go into our sandbox right now. They're trying out some things that are going to hopefully improve speed, but it requires them to, do some stuff in their sandbox, and so they asked us not to go there. When they're done, we'll go and we'll run some tests. I just heard about it today. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's great. I'm glad that they tapped us for assistance on this. But in that exchange, I sent a message off to her saying, look, I'm gonna write this up later, but at some point, if you could take the behind the scenes coding that you're using for production, overlay the stuff that's in the sandbox with that, we can start working with that from square one and build everything back up again. But this fact that you've got 2 things that are labeled the same because they're the exact same system numbers and even point releases, but they're not the same.
Okay, it'll be good to hear the results of that.
Yeah, I'm hoping it goes someplace. In the past, when we've said, hey, look, this behind the scenes stuff that nobody else has to deal with is giving us a real issue, their response has been, well, that's your problem. I'm paraphrasing. It's not like that, but that's...
Yeah, but it is everybody's problem because everyone's encouraged to do all their testing in the sandbox.
Yes.
And if you something that works in the sandbox and then you make that same change over on production and it doesn't work,
right,
that's a problem. And and it's not just a Hartford issue. And I'll try my best to see if I can get them to recognize that. But if there's going to be the capability to do local modifications, then at least the underlying code needs to be identical on both sandbox and production.
Right, right. Or tell us, this is what we're comfortable having you modify. This other stuff we're not going to support. As a matter of fact, we're going to actively encourage you not to do this. That's fine. Be open with it. The other thing is, other folks have expressed an interest in some of the modifications that we've done at Hartford. I want to share those with the folks, but I don't feel comfortable telling them, okay, this is what you need to do, and then finding out that, oh, no, that's not what you need to do. And when it breaks for us, it's going to break for them. And I can't do troubleshooting for other institutions as much as I'd like to. I can't do troubleshooting for other institutions as well. So that's a bummer. Oh, and South Central, I know that they do customizations on the back end almost as extensively as we do, and they're not going to appreciate finding this out either.
No, they aren't. They've run into some of that, I know.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how they have been handling it, but it continues to keep them busy, I think.
Yeah, and I also wonder whether it's pushing back their go live date, which I'm jealous of. There's a statement that no, it's not going to happen until at least 2020. Yeah, that would have been nice.
Actually, I've heard a different date again.
Oh, really?
Yes, Patrick told us that they were going to begin their migration in December.
Oh, all right. So almost 2020.
Almost 2020, but not quite.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what's behind the politics with that, but
yeah.
Something is.
Right. Right.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben.
Oh, you're welcome.
Let me see. Let's see, Anne isn't on the call, and hers was about reports as well. I don't see Elise on the call, but I did look through this one, and I think they were running into the same kind of item display issue that you were. Mary did help, and I think that she did. Yeah, she said that that she did do a little bit of changing in their item field setup, and it won't happen as often, but it still may. So since Elise hasn't answered yet, I don't know if she finds that as a good enough answer. Let's see. And Concordia found the same thing with course information as Hartford did. I noticed that there have been several requests about issues and receiving serials, like adding new issues, adding notes, etc. And I've had a few conversations with Jane about this, and she has done some background work. She's updating the video that is on their in the support center pages, and after I listen to and see that video, I'll let her know whether or not I think it would be a good idea to have her explain some things on one of these calls, or on a separate call that we set up especially for serials issues. And I think that that's all of them at this point. I encourage you all, if you run into things that don't seem right, or you don't remember working that way when you were on your previous version, please enter it into the support center, even if you think it's just something that's minor, etc. The only way we'll get the improvements that are needed in the software and to get things on a really stable course is to make sure that LibLine knows about all those little anomalies. As you can tell, it's hard for any one person or any one group even to identify all of the intricate connections that are among all of the code lines, and with them changing all the time, it becomes really important that anytime something is off, that they know about it. Okay, which brings me to the release notes. I think that the last release that you were made aware of might have been version 6.00.09. Just within the last couple of days. I think it was maybe last week that came about. Well, today I just got another announcement from Jane saying that release notes 6.0010 are now out. And that in and of itself, I think is difficult. And let me show you why I think it's difficult. The release notes are here, and I have searched for 6.0010. There are 15 different entries on this spreadsheet, and there are 41 pages in this spreadsheet. So trying to find all of those gets real interesting. Let me go up here a little bit. Okay. this one in particular, it's, let's see, what, on page 10 or something. This particular one is about the title subfields, which is somewhat an innocuous one, but you can see that there's been like 3 updates to it already in 5.21, 7, and 8, and then again in 6.00.10. Okay, that is identified here with a description, and you're told where to look in the guide, but I don't necessarily know what was different in 6.0010. So that's one of the issues that I find with getting the release notes like this. And then let me find another one here. Okay, this is one that shows that there have been enhancements made to the label tool. And the label tool definitely needed enhancements. I'm not complaining about that. But in the last 3 updates, or I'm sorry, in the last 3 point releases in 10, 9, and 8, there was all something done. And again, I can't tell for certain what was there. So I'm going to ask if we can have a little bit more information about this to find out exactly what it was that changed in point 8, point 9, and point 10, because I think that will help us to at least understand the history of those. Now, the other thing that I've noticed about this is because we keep getting more and more pages in the release notes, it gets harder and harder to keep track of what's where. And in order to try and come to some kind of way to group these enhancements and fixes in a way that's most useful, I went ahead and tried to pull out the different releases and put them in a spreadsheet. Now I'm going to make a couple of changes to this because I think that it will be useful. I want to add in the column that has the pivotal tracker number and possibly the support center number, so that there's a way to identify when things are changed. But I would like to be able in this spreadsheet to be able to tell you what was for 8, what was for 9, what was for 10. But that'll take getting more information from Jane about what these fixes were. Now, what I want to find out from you is, do you think that this will be useful for you to have something that tells you what's 6.8, 6.9, 6.10? So that you don't have to go back and look through the entire release notes in order to find these little nuggets? Okay, so since nobody's talking, I'm going to make an assumption one way, and then you can tell me whether or not you agree with my assumption. My assumption is that you prefer to go back to the big release notes and look through everything again in order to find the new things.
Hi, Becky.
Hi.
I'll chime in on this. No, I think it would be really useful. I know it's an awful lot of work, and it's a slog to go through all the stuff that's in that the spreadsheet of release notes that LibLine puts out, but there's way too much information in those release notes. So it's very helpful to be able to have some sort of mechanism to more easily pull out the discrete elements that affect us.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and there were a number of people in the chat who, like me, who responded to your question. So.
Oh, my chat doesn't automatically scroll. How about that? Okay. Okay, so I'll do this, and I'll email the spreadsheet to Waldo's support each time it's updated so that you have the newest copy of it. I'm now having questions. If it's something that has subsequent changes in each release, I will leave it on the first release page. What I'm thinking of doing is when there is something that is uniquely different from one release to another, from one point release to another, is to have different tabs on this spreadsheet, so that I would rename this one as tab 6.00.08, the next one 6.00.09, etc. I think that would be that would be a way to collect those discrete pieces that are updated multiple times versus those that are updated once and then fixed, so that it'd be a little bit easier to keep track of things. Having things change so frequently for things like the label printing, for those of you who are doing label printing, it has to be annoying. It's not downright frustrating to see things that are changing and not working the same way each time. So is that something that would be useful to you as well?
Hi, Becky.
Yeah.
Sierra actually asked this in chat, but it's a question that I have to ask myself. She'd like to know, is there a reason why the new point releases are happening so frequently right now?
Yes, there is a reason for that. Patrick had told me a couple months ago that after everyone was upgraded to version 6.00, whatever the point release was at the time, that they would be looking at starting on a 6.02. And since then, he's told me that instead of having a 6.2, they're going to be working more on point releases in response to all of the bug reports that are coming in from all the different institutions. And that's why the point releases are happening so frequently. And I think one of the reasons why they're just going ahead and doing them is because they've not been getting a whole lot of feedback from people, which, you know, since I was trying to cycle myself back a little bit, I wasn't paying much attention to it. But now I'm going to start looking at those things more. And I think that I'm going to ask them to maybe not do more than one a month at the very least, because for a while there it looked like they were doing them every 2 weeks or even every week. And I think that is way too difficult, especially when it's not understood what the changes are. So I will ask to have them try and not upgrade things quite so quickly, because I think what we're finding out is that we really need to have a little bit more time. You're working with new software, and then that new software is getting changed frequently. So it's very easy to see why you eventually throw your hands up and say, I'm not going to deal with it. We will.
I feel kind of bad. This is a classic case of careful what you wish for. Because I know in the past we've said, you know, why is it going to take so long to see these fixes in production? And
right.
now we're actually getting these fixes very quickly in production. But I do feel as though they're not adequately tested. So if we could get a heads up on what we should be looking at and testing in the sandbox, I'm happy to help out. But we can't, you know, we're geared up in a situation like a next release to go and do one big push of testing, and then sign off on it, and then say, okay, we can upgrade. The idea of these small things, if we can get a heads up, we can help. But it's tough, and of course, every time they do an upgrade, there's unintended consequences. There are things that we're working that break, and there's no way that we'd be able to find them.
Right. Right. Trying to set up test cases for every one of these is almost impossible. So I will talk with Patrick and try and figure something out with him. The issue is that some of these upgrades that are coming through, or the new enhancements, are things that are being requested by other libraries as new programming, and they may have had the code before we did, but we still have to react to it because it'll show up in our everyday work. And
Can I make
I
a
know,
request?
yes.
When something gets resolved, could a note be made in the ticket that we submitted? I see that many of the bugs that I've identified were fixed, but I was never notified that, yes, this bug is now fixed apart from the release notes. And to go through the release notes, it's really daunting to figure out is my problem solved or not, right? So if they could just close out the ticket with saying this issue was resolved, please refer to the release notes, whatever page, whatever, or whatever number they assign it, so that we know to look for it, rather than
Okay.
assuming we will find it.
I'll ask about that, because my understanding was that when something was fixed, that they were to respond that it had been fixed. But from their side, I've heard that people don't respond to their requests for additional information or whatever, and after so long, they just get tired of seeing them open and they close requests. So I'll be the intermediary and try and get that flowing a little bit easier. If I see them say something is fixed, I'll make my best effort to do some changing on that, or to do some testing on that, so that I can sort of help with it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to kind of echo what Ben said. They forced us to do this in the summer, and that's the worst possible time. The librarians here are on a 10-month contract, and so when I found that it had all of these problems, I just had to pour in a lot of work that I wasn't being paid for. And I didn't have the contact with the other people that I would have if they had scheduled this at a more reasonable time, or let us schedule it in a way that worked for us.
Yeah, this is a constant issue for everyone. Early on, when people were moving to Koha and things were changing quickly, it was like everyone was being forced to upgrade like every 2 months, it seemed like, and that was awful. That was difficult on all the staff, on all the patrons, on the programmers, on everyone. It just was really hard. And I've discussed with Patrick, what good times of the year are, and really it turns out that there are no good time that you can predict for everyone of the year in order to do upgrades. So as much as possible, I'm going to try and get them to agree that you can upgrade when you can upgrade, after you've had time to test and after you've had time to do something. And when you upgrade, it'll be to whatever the current release is, recognizing that there will be things that you will have not tested, but it will give you time to test your basic functions as much as you can. I don't know. The perfect time for upgrading definitely is not when staff isn't there. And for one-person libraries, there's never a good time to upgrade, because you're always busy and you never have time to test. So yeah, I'm sensitive to that, and I will keep bringing that up with Patrick as well.
Great.
Okay, so I will do some revision to this spreadsheet, adding in the 0.09 and 010 issues, and we'll talk with Patrick and Jane about some way that we can get a little bit better information about exactly what changes from one point release to another, so we know what to look for. Let me go back. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so that takes care of that. I have one other new thing to go over with you, and that is what I am going to be doing in my temporary part-time return to working with you all. And in the agreement that John and I worked up together, what I was asked to write down what things I thought I needed to do, and what I tried to figure out is what things were the most important in what I was doing. So these are a list of the things. There's a little bit of working with the libraries. There's a little bit of working with the ongoing data loads into the InfoMart, and also into some specifications that they want me to work on. So these are the things that you can expect from me. Let me start first with what we agreed to. I said I would agree to do some work, but I was not going to commit all of my time to working, since that's not what retirement is for. So we came to an agreement that the limit for my work hours in any month would be 30 hours a week that I would be, or 30, not a week, per month that I would be paid for. And my idea is that on the weeks where there are meetings with you all, that my input time would be about 10 hours a week, and the following would be 5 hours a week. I figured that should be enough to keep me appraised of what's going on with the software and how everyone is working with it. That also includes weekly meetings with LibLine. It also includes monitoring the support center and doing some testing and adding on, and do some beta testing of new features, and fixes, and then share those with the libraries through the meetings and through posting to Waldo support. I'll also maintain the Waldo support mailing list subscription, so if you have any changes, you can just ask me to do it. If you don't think I'm responding, you can also enter those requests into the support center, and Jatika is the person on the LibLine staff who monitors the support list as well. And then let me drop down through the InfoMart things. The other piece of it that I'm going to try and get done during this contract is to review the wiki content. What I've asked John about is to take any data that we consider important enough to maintain and keep and move it to the portal. The portal has a page. If you've ever looked at the Waldo webpage that's out there, there is supposed to be a spot there for all of the library automation software news. And this seems like a good time to try and get that transition started. So I want to go through everything that's on the wiki to determine what needs to be there, and then work with John throughout this contract time to try and get it over there and to make sure that you all have access to it the same way. The wiki itself, I've tried to upgrade the wiki a couple of times, and I never hear back from the company that does this. And right now, I can't post new pages. I can edit pages that are there, but I found that I can't add new pages because I'm over the limit of megabytes that I can use. So on the portal and InfoMart part of it, there's not ever going to be a limit of storage or data that we can have there. So that's one of the things that I want to get done. And the last thing is to train a replacement when someone is hired. I don't have any idea of what John's idea is on advertising and hiring someone. I have a feeling that he would be willing to continue doing short-term contracts forever, but I'm not willing to do that forever. So the initial contract that I have with him is set up for a time period of 6 months. There's an out clause. If either he or I decides that we don't want to continue, we can break it. But I will not just do that lightly. It will be, it would be something that I would have to be really important that came up. And at this point, I don't anticipate anything. So the current contract is valid September through February of 2020. So you'll be stuck with me for that long at least. Anything that you would like to ask me to do, feel free to ask. I'll let you know if I can do it or not, if I have the time. Yes, and Sierra, I know I owe you an email. I have not forgotten you. I've just been retired. So that's pretty much all that I have for today, unless there are questions about what I am intending to try to get done during this time period. Okay, we'll continue meeting on an every other week basis. So the next meeting that we will have will be the 26th of September. I'll be posting to the Waldo support mailing list, for example, the spreadsheet that I will get updated and out there. And that's one way to communicate with me. You can also send me direct email, or you can just send things to the support center and I'll read them. And if I have anything to add, I will add them. So that's all that I have for today. Anything else from anyone? Okay, that's all for today. This will be added onto YouTube as soon as it's done. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Becky.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome.